Writing is an art form. Academic writing, though, is not. Okay, maybe that was a little extreme, but it's important to say that academic writing is completely different than the type of writing that we are used to. So today I am unveiling mistakes that 80% of graduate students make and some tips to help you improve your writing quick and maybe even impress your professor. So the first mistake that is super common is that our sentences are just too complex and too long. During high school and even part of undergrad, complex sentences with multiple clauses were just all the rage. Those days are gone. And that's because when you are doing analytical writing or you are presenting a strong argument, having too many clauses or too much going on in one sentence can make it hard for your reader to follow your logic and to understand where you are going. So as a result, it is just so much easier and simpler for your academic writing to have shorter, more precise sentences versus longer, complex sentences with many clauses. A good rule of thumb is if your sentence seems to follow or land across 3 different lines within your page, it's probably entirely too long. So instead you should look at it, reevaluate, and see if you can turn it into 2 or maybe 3 separate sentences that guides your reader through your argument without all of the ands and colons and commas and em dashes that exist in the world. This is directly connected to the next major mistake that graduate students make, and that is when you are writing, you are being too vague and not concise. As graduate students, there is a lot of pressure to feel like we have to sound really academic or really formal. And so we may use words that are very vague or clunky sentences to try to bring in kind of that academic professional language. But saying things like, one would assume that, or saying things like, one could imagine, if one could, having all of these ones or ifs or coulds or shoulds or mights really do water down your language and make it hard for the reader to stay connected. It is also important that when you are writing your analytical writing, you are being explicit when you are being concise. So again, part of the reason why saying it could be assumed that is one, that it's clunky. It's 5 words that could completely be erased if you just start off with your argument. And then if you start off with your argument, then the reader can quickly identify what is it that you're trying to say, what is the most important thing, or what is your stance on what's going on. A simple rule of thumb is you want every word or every sentence in your academic writing to do something for you or do something for your argument. So filler words that are, vague or don't really have a specific reason of being in your sentence, you generally can just take it out and dive right into your strong verbs or your strong claims or your strong topic sentences to help the reader understand what is going on and why whatever you're saying matters. So again, it's just really important that every sentence is intentional. And so a good question to ask yourself after you write a sentence is, what did I want this sentence to do? And is it actually doing that? And if it seems to be too descriptive, or it seems to be too fluffy duffy, or just seems too transitional, more times than not, you can take it out and replace it with something that is shorter, stronger, or maybe just take it out and omit it altogether. Now, this next one, especially for graduate students in the social sciences or the humanities, is a big one, and that is quoting. Now, I understand that we are encouraged to quote, but how we use quotes can impact how well our academic writing is received. So generally, when you are writing a paper or doing an analysis, you don't want to include quotes to speak for you. So if you are making an argument and you feel like the sentence in the article is saying exactly what you want to say, it is much better for you to paraphrase and then cite versus copy and pasting it and quoting it and then continuing on with your conversation. And that's because academic writing, or analytical writing specifically, is about you as the author and your particular take. And so if you are quoting or using another author's word to describe what you want to say, you are undermining your academic authority and thus not doing the analysis yourself. It's also important to say so much about academic writing or analytical writing is about explaining its significance or how it's working. And so oftentimes when we take quotes, even small quotes, but bigger quotes, and we just plop them into our paper, it doesn't signal to the reader, or it doesn't explain enough to the reader why that matters or what's it doing for your argument. So it's important when you are including quotes that you make sure immediately after the quote that you are providing insight as to why you chose that quote, or what that quote is doing in relation to your argument, or how that quote is significant or supporting what you're trying to say. Now, in general, I would encourage people, unless you have to quote, to just forego quoting altogether, paraphrase, and cite. But if you're somebody who's really trying to understand when to use quotes or when not to use quotes, I would suggest that when you are using quotes, or the best time to use quotes, is when the quote itself is a piece of evidence. So it is a thing that you are analyzing of itself, either because of the words or because of the structure, or the thing itself matters from the document. Or if it is written so well that you cannot write it any better than the original author, then again, you might want to quote and then explain why it's significant. Another reason you may quote is that it has a really good or explicit definition that you don't think is appropriate to redefine for the purpose of your argument. But again, in all of these cases, I would try paraphrasing first and citing to make sure to see if it's a possibility to forego the quoting. It's just an easier way to avoid misquoting or using quotes incorrectly, and thus undermining your academic authority when you are writing. This next one really gets a lot of us. In fact, I was doing it for the first 3.5 years of my graduate career. And that is putting the word this or these or those at the beginning of a sentence and not following it with the this, these, or those that it's talking about. So this is difficult because how we naturally speak, we understand that when we say something at a previous point of the conversation, if we say this, it's usually referring to the thing that we were just talking about. But in academic writing, the this, the these, the those types of words can become very vague and hard for the reader to kind of connect your logic or figure out what exactly you're talking about, especially as you're writing, your theories or your ideas become more complex. So if you're writing a sentence and the previous sentence is saying something about a specific noun, and then in your next sentence you may say, this impacts da 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 da, or this is why da 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 da, it's important to follow up this noun is why this happens, or this noun is why, or important to this because of this, this, and this. Academic writing is about clarity. It is about conveying a conversation or an argument or a point. And so when there are moments where this, these, or those is left on its own, readers can get lost or make incorrect assumptions. And so for the sake of making sure that they understand exactly what you're talking about, anytime you put the word this or put the word these or those, you want to make sure it follows with the exact thing that you were talking about every single time. Now, I hope that you're not getting overwhelmed as you are listening to these things in the video, especially if you're somebody who was not doing any of these things before. Writing is a skill, and that means that every day you can and will get better the more you practice. I'm 4.5 years into my graduate process, and every day I'm still learning new things about writing. And so while it can be intimidating at first, it is definitely something that you will get better at and continue to improve. And if you want support to do that, I would check out my grad writing and reading playlist. If you found at least 2 things useful, hit a thumbs up so others know that this is a good quality video and YouTube shares it with those who may need it. Your support helps a small YouTuber like me continue to grow. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.